Hello, everyone.
Hello, hello.
We're going to give everybody about 3 minutes to get in. Time for the space to fill up. Seeing some return Zoomers here. Welcome, everyone. Seeing some board members here, some colleagues. This is fantastic. I am Zooming tonight from my house, and Amy is in the beautiful DuPont Library with a background that literally looks like it's fake.
Not a green screen, it's the actual background.
One of my favorite places at Stratford Hall is in that library reading room. Welcome, everyone. Oh, I'm loving this. I'm seeing so many returning, is it Zoomer? It's not really a thing, right? I'm seeing so many
Zoomers are Gen Z, I think.
Oh, that's true. Okay, so many returning visitors, virtual visitors, attendees. Maybe that's the proper word. Welcome, everyone. Welcome, welcome. We're going to give everybody about 2 more minutes, and then we're going to kick it off. Amy and I are really excited about giving you all a sneak peek at our wonderful exhibit that we've worked incredibly hard on for the last couple of years.
Yes, incredibly. Blood, sweat, and tears.
Yep, a lot of tears and a lot of sweat. Not too much blood, though. Thank you.
No, we did pretty good there.
No major cuts there. Very exciting. Welcome, welcome. I'm loving it's filling up here. This is really exciting. Give everyone about 1 more minute, and then we're going to kick it off. Yeah, it's I have a little bit of an allergy thing going on here with the pollen in the air right now, so forgive my occasional cough. I do not have COVID.
You and me both. It's that time of year.
Exactly. So for those of you that are new to our Zoom talks at Stratford Hall, we will present for about 45 minutes or so and then open it up for question and answer. We can enable the chat just because it's distracting, I think, for the presenters, and I think it's better if we save the questions and commentary for the end discussion. So if you look at the bottom of your screen, you will see a Q&A little bubble, and just go ahead and ask some questions, and Amy and I will be happy to answer any of them after we're finished presenting tonight. So, all right. Got another few seconds here. Welcome, everyone. This is very exciting. All right. I think we've gotten a solid number of people here that have been waiting from. So I'll go ahead and kick it off. Welcome, everyone, to Stratford Hall's program tonight. I have missed these. Excuse me. I have missed all of these Zoom programs that we had last year, and it's exciting to kick off the new season. Please check our website for upcoming talks. There's going to be a very healthy sort of assortment of lectures happening over the next year, everything from foodways to the history of the Lees and all kinds of fantastic things. So my name, for those of you who do not know me, is Dr. Kelley Fanto Deetz. I'm the Director of Collections and Visitor Engagement at Stratford Hall. I'm joined here with our wonderful curator, Amy Connolly. We literally both started on the same day, 3.5 years ago. And it's an honor and a privilege to work with Amy. She is brilliant. And we have a similar mind. We love objects. We love to tell stories through things, through material culture. And because of this excitement that we had about our collections at Stratford Hall, I would say it was very easy putting this exhibit together. Would you say?
Yes, definitely. Definitely. Huge, vast collection.
Vast collection. One of the things that I think we did very early on in our tenure at Stratford Hall is we dipped down into that storage unit or the storage area and went through some of those objects and fell in love with the things that we have to.
Yeah, and most of them are in the exhibit today.
Yeah. It's so exciting. So this exhibit, excuse me, is a sort of brainchild of Amy and I. It was a collective effort from a lot of staff and consultants and people from the community helped put this exhibit together. It was all done in-house. And I think that that's really important to sort of stress, because the amount of work that it takes any museum to put on an exhibit, small or large, is boundless. And we were able to do this with all of our staff, with all of our resources in-house. Amy has a phenomenal artistic eye and a background in graphic design, and you'll see some of her work as we go through the slideshow tonight. And we're excited to show this all with you. So I'm going to go ahead and start the slideshow. And yeah, we'll kick this off. So I am very excited. Hang tight, everyone, while I share my screen. All right. All right, so tonight we're going to be talking about our new exhibit that's opening up at the end of the month. It's called Stratford at the Crossroads, Atlantic Cultures in the Creation of America. This exhibit title and the idea behind it came from Stratford itself. Stratford was a very important location in the Atlantic world. It was also the site where indentured Europeans, wealthy people like the Lees, and enslaved African and African Americans literally came together, some by choice and others by not, and their cultures collided in this new America. We have gone through our exhibit. We found objects that represent all of the different people that would have been living or laboring at Stratford Hall, including the Virginia Indians. And we've developed a way to tell their stories through objects in this new exhibit. I'm going to come back to the idea of the crossroads at the end of the talk. If you've seen my other lectures or have visited the exhibit as it was being developed, you know that the crossroads are very important for a couple of reasons, but the literal sort of translation of that word is literally thinking about the roads sort of colliding. Different people, different cultures coming together and meeting in the middle. And that's what we're doing here with this exhibit at Stratford Hall. So this exhibit started, this idea of the exhibit started about, what on earth was that? I'm sorry, hold on one second here. Give me 1 second, I'm sorry.
There we go.
Okay, back at it. Okay, all right. This right here is our treasure. This is Stratford Hall, the great house. It was established and started construction rather, in 1738. Mr. Thomas Lee and his beautiful wife, Hannah Ludwia Lee, were the first sort of owners and sort of controllers over this site. And they ordered this beautiful Georgian mansion to be built. And in the process of doing this, they used the enslaved labor of 70 Africans from West Africa, very likely from the Liverpool merchant that came over during the same period, where Thomas Lee at that point purchased and was sort of in control of 70 enslaved Africans from Senegal, Gambia, and Ghana. And those enslaved Africans, as well as some African Americans that were also enslaved and indentured laborers and free white laborers at Stratford Hall, built this beautiful mansion that we work and love and cherish today. So let's jump right into the exhibit. The exhibit is in addition to the rest of the house. And so when you come to Stratford Hall, you enter in through the front gate, you go to the visitor center. And as you walk in the visitor center, there's a kiosk in the middle. And on the right, there's a wonderful exhibit about the Lees, and it's been there for a couple of decades now. And then on the left, there was this space that you see right here. It was called the Preservation Gallery, and it was really a space that was very functional. We were able to, before our tenure, we were able to put in objects that we didn't really want to put in storage because they were important, but they didn't quite fit into the house. And we were able to use this space kind of as a piecemeal for some of the objects that were not being sort of fully functional in the great house in the interpretation. And again, it was an important space. It was a large space, but Amy and I felt that it could be improved. And we wanted to not only improve the space and sort of bring new objects from the collections into the space to tell these stories, but we also wanted an updated look. Amy and I have very similar sort of tastes when it comes to museum exhibits, which I think is really helpful, because what we imagined very quickly was the same exact sort of aesthetic. And this is what it looks like now. Drum roll, please. Ta-da! This right here is the newly imagined space. Literally, we painted the walls, or we didn't paint the walls. Phil and his team painted the walls. We cleaned the carpets. We ordered a beautiful rug for the middle, and we ordered a bunch of cases, as well as sort of moving some movable walls around to make this space look distinctly different. So what you see here is our new exhibit, and I'll go back to the other slide again. What you see right here where the picture of the Great House is the back of this where the title of the exhibit is sits now. Every decal, every large sticker, including those large maps that you see in the back, were put on by Amy and I very stressfully at times. And the entire exhibit, again, was curated in-house, the design of it, etc. And it was an incredible process with, I think, a really beautiful result. So as you walk into this space, you are surrounded by two walls, shorter walls, one on the left and one on the right. And what you see here are these absolutely gorgeous 18th century maps of West Africa. These maps were donated by Jim Lee, who is a wonderful donor to Stratford Hall and just a good friend to the organization. He was able to gift these to us, and we were able to frame them in-house from Tiffany Scott, one of our staff members, had a background in framing, and so she put these beautiful 18th century maps in gold, and we placed them as you walk in to start really thinking about the Atlantic world. Who were the Lees engaging with? What was their sort of imagination like as they thought about the colony, as they thought about their pursuits in colonization? Who were they dealing with? Where were they going? Or where were they getting people from? So this sort of hallway of sorts, it's a short little sort of walkway as you get in with two walls on each side, really sort of starts to set the tone of the sort of context of the Atlantic world, the places in which the Lees were very much involved with. And to continue the sort of map theme in all of this, we have these two very large maps that both are from 1732. And they are situated, as you saw, in the back on the left and the right on those walls, to then sort of enclose the exhibit in more maps and more sort of understanding of geography and exploration and colonization. So these maps right here are from 1732. Stratford was established in 1738. So these two maps, this and the one of Africa, were very much part of the world that these Lees that established Stratford Hall and those who were enslaved there were a part of. And these maps are so large that you're able to walk up and really look at the notation and really get a better understanding of what was marked important to people, how the different slave traders, for instance, were sort of approaching these places, and the ways in which we can sort of start connecting people that were enslaved at Stratford Hall to places like Senegambia over here and Ghana, etc. These kinds of maps are really important, again, in sort of contextualizing the Atlantic world and breaking Stratford out of just this very Virginia story and putting it in a larger story of English colonization. So on the left side of the wall, there's an exhibit called Leading Ladies. And if you can use your imagination, this wall right here on the left with the absolutely phenomenal christening gown in the case, that is the other side of one of those map walls. And then on the right side, you see the historic preservation sign. So as you walk in, the left wall is all the Leading Ladies exhibit, and the right wall is historic preservation. So the Leading Ladies exhibit, I'll talk about in a moment. The historic preservation exhibit is all of the efforts and sort of some of the evidence of the really phenomenal preservation efforts that started in 1929, when that group of really important women established the Robert E. Lee Memorial Association and started the preservation efforts of Stratford Hall. And we are grateful to them and the board now for letting us continue this work with integrity. So you notice that there's not a lot of words on the wall. I mean, of course, you've got the little sort of captions, but this is not a text-heavy exhibit. What we wanted, Amy and I wanted, was to really create a space that's contemplative. People can come in and look at objects and really sort of think about these things collectively, these things individually, and really sort of start imagining different connections between them, between yourself and these objects, asking questions. And so in order to create this kind of space and atmosphere, Amy and I decided that the best thing we should do is have a booklet made, which Amy made beautifully. She did this entire booklet. How many pages is it, Amy?
I want to say it's like close to 50. No, it's not. Maybe.
It's pushing.
It's hefty.
Very solid booklet. I mean, it took a lot of work, and in this booklet is phenomenal photography done by Amy, and each object has a number on it that you can see here in a moment. I'll show you in a second. Each object in the cases and on the wall has a number that coincides with the numbers of the letters on the actual booklet. And every single guest at Stratford Hall gets one of these to take home. So not only is it a tool to tell these stories, to be able to have a sort of certain kind of very engaging experience with this exhibit and some of our treasures, but it also allows the guests to take this booklet home and be able to share it with people and talk about it and show people the wonderful treasures that we have at Stratford Hall. This right here is the leading lady wall. So again, you walk in from the left here, you would turn around and do a loop on this side of the wall. And the leading lady exhibit on that side of the wall really highlights the really important Lee ladies that lived or were part of the Lee family during the 18th and 19th century. A lot of the history that's been very prominent at Stratford Hall for the majority of its existence as a museum has been about the Lee men, and they are incredibly important. And we have some very amazing artifacts that belong to them in these cases and on the walls. But we wanted to really take a moment and highlight some of these women, some of the women especially who increased the wealth and prestige of the Lee men and made their lives way better than they would have been if they married somebody else. And so part of the effort of this Leading Ladies is to really elevate the story of not just the Lee ladies, but also the enslaved woman as well. So here is one of the sort of duos that we have set up in the Leading Lady exhibit. On the left, you see Mrs. Hannah Ludwia Lee. She is the first lady of Stratford Hall. That is an original portrait that we actually used to have in the Great Hall, and we took down for the purpose of telling her story close up in this particular space. And on the right, you see a silhouette of a woman who works currently at Stratford Hall. Her name is Martha Newman. And she is a descendant of the enslaved from the area. And her, along with other descendants that are actually from the enslaved at Stratford Hall, chose to have their silhouettes traced by Amy and placed next to these Lee ladies in this exhibit. This is a very intentional move. We have got significant amount of information on these important Lee women. We don't have a lot of information about the enslaved women who would have literally been combing the hair of these Lee ladies, getting them dressed in the morning, at sometimes being their confidant, cooking the food, nursing their children. And we wanted to be sure to include these women in this exhibit, but doing it in a way that connects them to the descendants and does it in a respectful manner to literally rewrite and reinscribe their history into the history of Stratford. They were not painted typically. They did not make their way into the records the same way that these ladies did. So we are intentionally putting them into the record through this exhibit at Stratford. So here are some of the objects, like I mentioned a minute ago, those little tiny, they look like sort of clear cubes or dice are the numbers that you would find keys to for that booklet that I showed you a moment ago. This is one of the 4 cases that we have in the middle of the sort of common area of the exhibit. And as you see here, there's a collection of different things. There are beads that are West African beads. There are beads that were made in Europe. There are native Virginian projectile points. There's a copper spoon. There's pottery right there. It's called collinaware that was made by the enslaved Africans at Stratford Hall. And you also have Robert E. Lee's grandmother's shoes, all in the same case. This is a very intentional placement. Amy and I, and those of us at Stratford Hall, believe that these stories need to be told together because everybody at that point knew one another. They lived in similar spaces, they lived together in different ways, but these objects represent Stratford Hall individually and people individually, but they also collectively tell the story of people, of Stratford Hall, the history of Virginia, and the history of America. And integrating this kind of history in the ways in which we did here in this exhibit was an intentional way to marry these objects and these stories that have been pulled out away from each other for generations. And it is in that moment that I'm going to pass it off to my esteemed colleague, our curator here, and she's going to tell you about some of her favorite objects in the exhibit.
Thank you. You can hear me okay, yeah?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so I have many favorite objects in this exhibit, and this just happens to be one of them. This piece is a neoclassical mourning pendant, and it's memorializing the death of Emily Lee, a 4-year-old who we believe died around 1817 or 1818. So throughout history, humans have displayed their grief and their mourning throughout various artistic and decorative ways, regardless of culture or where you're from. And this just so happens to be one way that was done in the Western world. So the Neoclassical Movement was an art movement that inspired fashion trends, painting, decorative arts, architecture, and essentially even the way we mourned our dead. It was a prevalent part of mid to late 18th century society, and it even extended into the early 19th century. And with it, it kind of brought to light this kind of new artistic and moral outlook on death. So during this period, we had archaeological discoveries of Pompeii, Herculaneum, and various other ancient Greek and Roman sites were being discovered, and it was hugely influential on trends of the time. So how did mourning jewelry change over the course of time? So prior to 1760, death had kind of been represented in this very ecclesiastical form. It was very Christian in its outlook. You have ideas of memento mori, or inevitable mortality. And these were key themes in the jewelry at the time. So we see memento mori rings, we're seeing skeleton figures or like skulls and crossbones. And they were essentially warning people at the time to, in a sense, live life to the fullest, because you will die one day, unfortunately. So not very morbid at all. Very much rooted in Christianity, and there was no real personal touch. Slide, please, Kelley. Thank you. So neoclassical memorial jewelry had obviously heavy Greco-Roman influences, often depicting classical allegorical figures, and often included human hair. We even have individuals dressing rather classically, as you can see here. So again, the inclusion of human hair, it was making the piece more personal. So these pieces are often known for containing many symbolic layers, and more often than not, they have several recurring themes presented throughout the scenery. So this piece is one of a few mourning pendants we have in our collection, and it's actually the largest one we have, and it measures around 3 inches in height and 2.5 inches in width. And as I mentioned earlier, it's commemorating the death of Emily Lee. So the piece was commissioned by her parents. And like most mourning jewelry, it features hair on the reverse side of the piece, which you can see on the right-hand side here. So as you can see, there's this lovely little lock of blonde hair, and it's fastened with 4 pearls. And the pearls are very significant here, as they indicate the loss of a child, but they also indicate a pearl for every year. So she was 4 years old. And pearls are hugely symbolic in mourning jewelry, even into the 19th century, as they often represent tears. So what is really lovely about this piece as well is that around the little tuft of hair, we've got the mother's hair featured, what we believe is mother's hair, in a plait, and it's almost in like a protective circle around the child's hair. The grieving mother is, I believe she's depicted in the piece. If you look to the left there, you see a woman with her hands in prayer, and she's gazing up towards the sky at 2 angels that are offering her this sort of consoling verse, weep not, she is with her God and me. And the 2 angels there, one of them is smaller and likely the soul or the angel of the deceased. So you see the mother is dressed incredibly classically in style. The fabric drapes on her body similarly to that of the styles worn in ancient Greece, and she's wearing a veil, which is very symbolic of her mourning. Another hugely significant symbol in these neoclassical mourning pieces is the presence of the Weeping Willow. Now, the Weeping Willow, it's in its name. It is a significant metaphor for human grief and sorrow, and it usually always stands slumped over like an urn or a tombstone. And this is a common depiction at the time. It's kind of low-hanging nature, kind of reflects the somber mood of the piece. And the urn, which you can see depicted in the center, is a very popular representation of death in the neoclassical movement. And it's another influence from Greek and Roman, ancient Greek and ancient Rome, as cremation was incredibly common practice, and urns were found everywhere. Slide, please, Kelley. Thank you. So
cool. Go ahead. Sorry.
I know, aren't they amazing?
I'm loving this so much.
So these aren't in our collection, sadly. I wish I owned all of these. But as you can see, these are other examples of neoclassical memorial jewelry from this time period, and they contain so many similar elements. So often there is a grieving female depicted, or an allegorical figure like you see in the bottom right-hand corner. We've got Hope there, and she's represented with her anchor. Again, you can see the Weeping Willow. We've got these muted sepia color palette, the urn, we've got angels. We have cypress trees, which you can see in the second from the left and directly below as well. And the cypress tree was known by the Greeks and the Romans as the mournful tree. And it represents hope because it's pointing towards the heavens. So again, there's these themes of hope, that you will be reunited, that your loved ones are safe. It's a very comforting, loving message compared to the memento mori jewelry of the past, which is very much like, you are going to die one day, just remember this. Whereas this is the complete opposite. I know which one I would prefer to have. And we can even see the incorporation of hair in the top right there. We even have a weeping willow made out of hair. It was very common to incorporate hair into the physical art piece as well. But I have to say, as lovely and as beautiful as all these are, I have to say that ours is very stunning. And the level of detail in our one is absolutely gorgeous. I mean, with the personal depiction of mother's grief and the hair, it's just incredibly moving. Others may find it a little creepy, but I absolutely adore it. Slide, please.
Speaking
of creepy, and the Halloween season, this next object is kind of like a fine example of the objects we have in our collection that have absolutely no connection whatsoever with the Lees, but they're super fascinating nonetheless. So thank you, past curators who accepted these in the 1960s. I love them. So the collection here at Stratford, we've got 14 tarot cards believed to date as early as the 1730s. Now, 7 of them make up the 21 major arcana cards, while the remaining 7 belong to the minor arcana. So the cards are modeled off of a French 15th century design known as Tarot de Marseille. But tarot cards' actual origin come from Italy, and it was formerly known as tarocchi. So prior to the 17th century, even just before the 18th century, tarot cards had very little mystic significance, and they were never utilized as tools of divination, but simply as a card playing game. And I think one thing to note as well that's really important, it wasn't a gendered game experience. Both men and women played together. So the cards in the collection, they appear to be printed from woodblock prints, and it was very common for tarot cards to be hand-painted post-print. This appears to be the case here. So our major arcana cards, we've got the High Priestess, we've got the Empress, Death, Temperance, the Star, the Moon, the Sun. There's several theories out there that kind of dispute the origins of these figures in the major arcana. A lot of people believe that these characters are possibly representations of like the carnival processions leading up to Lent, or that they're, you know, really wealthy families, established families of northern Italy, or they're just simply like the faithful representation of everyday sort of life. So the 7 additional cards we have, unfortunately we don't have all of them, contain a couple of cards from the swords, the coins, which we now refer to as pentacles these days, cups, and batons. So wands were referred to as batons back in the day. So traditionally the game would have also involved a 4th base card known as a valet or knave, which we would refer to today as a page. So the game itself, I have no idea how to play it, but it was a 78 card trick taking game, and it was most commonly played with 4 to 5 players. And the objective of the game was essentially to capture the most points. And if anyone here has played bridge or knows how to play bridge, email me, because apparently that is its modern day counterpart. Slide, please, Kelley. So how did it become tarot as we know it today? So in the 1790s, a man named Jean-Baptiste Alliette, or Etelia was his kind of like nickname. He was a French occultist. He popularized tarot divination, and he even went on to publish one of the first definitive guides into tarot reading. He even designed his own tarot deck, and he did this by utilizing older versions of French cartomancy and incorporated, the 4 elements: earth, air, fire, water, and astrology. And so tarot cards, tarot reading, as we know today, all derives from this man. So as you can see here, we've got several different depictions of fortune telling or card reading. So tarot in general has been depicted in painting for centuries, and usually these paintings are entitled The Fortune Teller, and they nearly always depict a woman reading the cards. So we start to see divination in the 18th and 19th centuries become quite a strictly gendered experience. You can see this gentleman in the George Morling painting on the left. It appears that he is getting his fortune read. There's a young lady in the middle who we can just make out there are tarot cards that she is reading. And I don't know if he's too happy with what she's telling him. We're moving on to the painting on the right, and this lady is definitely not happy with what this lady is telling her. But you can see that the cards she's reading are actual normal playing cards. And so even today, you can read playing cards as tarot cards. So they're very incredibly similar. And at the bottom, we've got this gorgeous piece by Henry Herman Roseland, and he was known for depicting the lives of African Americans, and especially those of Black women, reading tea leaves or palms or cards for white women. And he's most recognized for a painting he has called To the Highest Bidder, which is famously owned by Oprah Winfrey, and it depicts a young girl being taken away from her mother at slave auction. So he has a series of these paintings with these 2 ladies in particular that he has recreated different scenes, and one's tarot reading, one's palm reading, one's tea leaf reading. It's beautiful. Next object. So next slide, please, Kelley. So we have another wonderful object. I am going to refer to it as an equipage and a chatelaine because the 2 terms can be used together. So it is essentially a decorative chain that hooked onto the waist of its female wearer, and it carried an assembly of useful household items. So this one in Stratford's collection is actually Dutch. And it's, again, one of those objects that came into the collection. It dates 1750, 1770. Doesn't have anything to do with the Lees, but it says so much about the time period, about society then. And you can see that I've referred to it as an equipage, but later versions in the 19th century became known as a chatelaine. So that's where the names kind of get muddled. So ladies would essentially suspend a variety of everyday items from these chains. So you can see here, this one seems to be assembled for a seamstress of sorts, or someone who needs to be able to access her sewing needles whenever she can. So we've got a scissors. The second piece in the middle there, that teardrop shape, it is a pin cushion. And then the little round thing on the end is in the shape of a walnut. And it is a thimble case, or it's used to store needles. And so it was not uncommon as well for, chatelaines like this to have a watch on them or a miniature portrait. Keys, it kind of was like the everyday essentials were thrown onto these things. So you can see on the left, it has a very intricate silver belt clip. And this clip would have hooked onto the waist of the woman wearing it. And now, when I first got here, she was a mystery to me. She was a mystery to everyone. We were trying to figure out, who is this woman? And I think that she's holding a mirror in one hand and a snake in the other. And I believe that she is the allegorical figure or personification of prudence. So slide, please, Kelley.
I love this. When you discovered this, it was like one of those moments, you know.
It was kind of like one of those eureka moments.
Cool. Good.
Yeah, so she's frequently depicted with a mirror and a snake. And I remember when I was first looking at her, I was like, is she holding a bird? Like, is she holding a vase? Like, what is this in her hand? But I think it's a mirror and I think it's a snake. And I think it's just been worn away to time. So it wasn't uncommon for classical figures like the seven virtues to be depicted on feminine items from the time. And her significance on the piece isn't entirely known, but perhaps she serves as a little gentle reminder to the wearer to be cautious and to discipline oneself. So gradually then, throughout the 19th century, the equipage became the chatelaine. And this is the French word for a woman in charge of the household. And with it, this object became more of a fashionable accessory, more so than like a utilitarian device. Slide, please, Kelley. So objects associated with growing female trends are often, subject matter for ridicule, which we can say today this still exists. And in the 19th century, that was rife for women. So we've got two prints here by Punch magazine in 1849. Both prints depict two women, but the first one is a woman flaunting her newly gifted chatelaine, which is equipped with an alarming large quantity of household items. And she's showing it to her mother, and it says, "The chatelaine, a really useful present." And then at the bottom it says, "Oh, look, ma dear, see what a love of chatelaine Edward has given me." So she's essentially been gifted the chatelaine that has everything but the kitchen sink attached to her. So it kind of gives this impression that women were these jingly jangly entities walking around with their chatelaines. And then over on the right side, we've got how to make a chatelaine a real blessing to mothers. And it makes light of this 19th century struggles of motherhood and the use of the chatelaine. And we can see it's tied to not only her children, the pram, but even the family dog is attached to it. So it's just funny how these pieces kind of get twisted in media through time. So the last object I'll be talking about, next slide, please. Kelley, slide.
I have it on my screen.
I don't have it on my screen, but it doesn't matter.
Here, wait, hold on. Go back, forth. You see it?
No, it's frozen.
All right, I'll exit out here. Did it work?
It flashed on the screen for a second.
Okay, hold on here. That's all right.
It was going too easy. I was too smooth sailing.
All right.
Okay, it's loading. There we go. There we go. Okay, keeping with the theme of hair and morbid and Halloween. We're coming up to Halloween, so I feel like it's appropriate to talk about this kind of stuff. And it speaks to kind of my morbid curiosity. So this is a hair bracelet, a bracelet made of hair. The significance of hair in 18th and 19th century culture has long been associated with the art of mourning. However, hair wasn't always connected to the dead, and it was often gifted from the living. So exchanging hair in the 19th century had powerful connotations, hugely sentimental, and to keep the hair of the loved one, either if they were living or dead, meant kind of retaining this physical and emotional kind of remnant of another human being. So possessing the hair of the dead kind of constructed this like physical barrier between the living and the dead, and it was incredibly resistant to the physical effects of death and decay, and therefore it made it like this wonderfully viable material to do all this sort of wonderful intricate weaving with. For anyone who's going, ugh, this is disgusting, we have to remember this is a time where either like even before 1870s, before 1850s, you know, photography didn't exist, or it wasn't widely available, or people weren't having portraits done of themselves. So how do you kind of retain the essence of someone you love if they've passed? And hair is kind of one of those materials that kind of works. And I mean, mothers still to this day do it with baby books. So next slide, please, Kelley. So the fabrication of these pieces was profoundly personal, and it was often a solely feminized experience at the time, as it was mostly women wearing these pieces, or they were like making them at home. So 19th century mourning wear really dominated the way a woman dressed for years, and deep mourning was the first stage of mourning, and it required a woman to wear only black for a year and 1 day after a bereavement. So we can see on the left-hand side here, this lady is in deep mourning. The next stage was half mourning, and this followed with different black fabrics that could be worn for up to 6 months. And then the final stage of mourning was known as light mourning, which this lady on the right seems to be in, and it incorporated the use of like subdued colors and hair jewelry for 3 months. So this was a large period of time where you were physically displaying your grief. So the hair bracelet at Stratford Hall, if you could slide to the next one, Kelley. Thank you. It's an unusual piece because we don't know if its intended purpose was for mourning, because the object, well, as far as the collection's records go, the object dates between 1860 and 1870. And what's really significant about this piece is that it's believed to contain the hair of Robert E. Lee, braided and woven into the sword that Kelley's pointing out there. And this is like a little pendant that dangled from the bracelet. The bracelet also features 12 barrels of hair, barrels wrapped and weaved with hair in a variety of different color tones. And the hair seems to have been obtained from various sources. And there are these little gold end caps you can see at the end of each barrel. And they have little inscriptions of initials, which I have yet to figure out. But I want to sit down one day with Judy Henson and try and figure out whose hair is whose. It's not a very important task, but I'm curious nonetheless. So if you move on to the next slide, Kelley. So this catalog here is by a hair jeweler in New York, A. Bernard and Co., and it dates 1870. And essentially you could order your hair jewelry custom made to your liking. And the fourth bracelet on the left, which was in the previous slide, looks strikingly like the bracelet that we have in our collection. And so jewelers often accepted hair via post, and you know, you could write specific instructions and mail them off to your jeweler. But it also happens to be the same year that Robert E. Lee died, 1870. So it could quite be a family mourning piece, but we're not so sure. It could also be just a familial affection piece. But whatever emotional message it bears, I think it is stunning and definitely a beautiful example of the hair craftsmanship of the time period. And that's me talking your ears off.
What I'm noticing too is, you know, there's that little acorn bit of hair too, and they're up here.
Yes, so acorns symbolize strength, apparently, from this time period.
Oh, so fantastic. I have a couple of things I want to share. Of course, I've given several talks, even some recently as May, when I gave a talk on some of the stuff that we found in the walls, but I am going to show a couple of things that I particularly love, in addition to, I mean, honestly, I think everything we chose, right, for this exhibit, Amy, is something that we have both felt, you know, definitely some love towards. So
yes, absolutely.
Absolutely. But this right here, this is a pipe over here on the right, you see number 27 next to the tarot cards and some absolutely stunning 1790s Iroquois fans. But this right here was found in the oval site, which was excavated a couple of decades ago by, excuse me, Mary Washington University and Doug Sanford. And there's been, what, 4 or 5 decades of archaeology done at Stratford Hall, and an incredible amount of this material.
So I think Kelley's internet's just cut out and she will likely be tuning back in any second. It has a tendency to do this, and I was told to warn everyone if this was the case.
It was the site where the original...
There we go. Kelley, you got cut out for a little second there.
Okay, I'll start. Thank you. I'll start over. So this pipe right here comes from the Oval site, which was where the temporary housing was built by enslaved laborers, for enslaved laborers and the indentured folks and the skilled laborers to build Stratford Hall. And it was occupied from about 1738 for the next like 10 plus years or so. And it was in this area that this pipe was excavated. And I particularly love this pipe because, one, it's pretty fantastic. And as an archaeologist, I have never seen anything like this in anything I've ever excavated, but it's made with a tortoise shell and it's got a sterling silver ring around it. And this is one of those pipes that you would pack with tobacco and then hold right up to your mouth. And this is a very common pipe that you see in parts of North Africa, and a significant number of those first 70 enslaved Africans came from Senegambia, and a percentage of them would have been sort of part of that North African, West African slave trade. They would have been Muslim. People like Osman and others are documented in the record in that early period. And so this pipe really represents that initial group of Africans that were there. This pipe very likely made it across the Middle Passage in the hands of someone who was on a slave ship. And I think it's important to include this as another bit of evidence, one of those pieces that tells a story, right? Individually and collective of Stratford Hall. This right here is absolutely fantastic. I guarantee a lot of you that are watching this right now have been to Stratford Hall, have gone into the Southwest outbuilding and seen this beautiful mural of a horse in the workshop. It was labeled in the exhibit as just a horse mural, nothing really particular about it. Judy Henson, as we were working on this exhibit, pointed us to General Cheatham's diary, in which he talks about an oral history that was taken in the 19th century. And this horse was actually painted by a woman named Anne Wilson, who was likely the daughter of the cook. I think that name is right. Did I mess that up?
Weldon.
Okay, yes. Yeah, Anne Weldon, I'm sorry, the daughter of the enslaved cook at Stratford Hall. And it was painted there probably along with some others that are lost in time. And apparently she also painted some figurines on the same sort of area in the kitchen, which are now unfortunately lost to history. And I'm going to end, or we are going to end, with this object really quickly. I gave an entire lecture on this piece, and I think it's pretty fantastic that when Amy and I first started 3.5 years ago, we had this kind of synergy, and we've worked with the staff, with the community, with the descendants, with different historians, with consultants, to really create an exhibit that we're both incredibly proud of, that tells the story of everybody that was at Stratford at one time or another. This object was literally found by Amy in the collection storage, not cataloged, in an envelope that literally said, found in the northeast windowsill of the Great Hall, and it was labeled as flint. And very quickly, as she pulled it out as an object that possibly could go in the preservation side of the exhibit, she showed it to me and I knew exactly what it was. This object right here.
And she's cut out again, I think. If everyone's just a little bit patient, she will be back. I think she's having internet issues.
Of that
Kelley,
room.
I'm sorry, you cut out again.
No,
I know. It was going so well.
It's all right. Where did it stop? So I can start over.
It was just after the part where I had found it, and the envelope was labeled as flint, but we know it's not flint.
Okay, yeah. So this actually is a calcite crystal. I gave an entire talk on this back in May. It is on our YouTube channel, but this is very likely an object that was placed in the wall in the northeast quadrant of that space intentionally as a practice of the African-American conjuring tradition of hoodoo, in which West African people would take objects, things like crystals, etc., and use them to conjure spirits. They would also use the X, the crossroads, literally is carved into both sides of this crystal to conjure their ancestors, to conjure spirits for protection. And objects like this have been found archaeologically across the mid-Atlantic. Even at Montpelier, they had a phenomenal crystal that they found in their slave quarter. And this object is representative of that first generation of Africans who were enslaved, who were brought over, the people that constructed the house, and really symbolizes not only the crossroads of sort of the spiritual world and these enslaved people trying to find peace and a sense of comfort in the sort of terrors of slavery, but also it's incredibly iconic in that it's literally the crossroads, which is the name of the exhibit that we picked years before this was found. And so as we wrap this up, I want to thank everyone, especially the leadership of the board of directors and the support of donors who made this exhibition possible. See if I can get that out. All right, I'm gonna stop sharing. We're gonna open it up.
My camera back on.
All right.
There we go.
All right. Somehow I didn't disable the chat, but that's okay. It didn't distract us too much.
Didn't distract. Everyone was great.
All right, here, give me 1 second.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, it's fun.
Your sound is gone again, Kelley. And you're frozen again. Your sound is gone. Waiting. Not yet. There we go. You're back. You're back.
We're blowing here. I don't know what's going on. We have a wonderful question from TM Fine. Who was the designer architect of the Great House? We actually don't know. Have no idea at all. So it's a big mystery. But
we do believe Hannah Ludwell had a huge influence in the design of the house, because I believe Philip Ludwell, her son, wasn't too fond of it.
Yeah, and blamed his mother for the design. So
yeah.
I feel like Mrs. Hannah Ludwia Lee was definitely speaking with whoever was designing that house. That's absolutely a wonderful question. All right, another one. Oh wow, I think Mr. Fine, maybe not, is asking a ton of great questions. Interesting slide of mourning pendants, locks of hair, etc. Sad of the loss of young Emily Lee, 4 years old. Infant deaths were not unusual in those days. Did the Lees have a medic or doctor in the house, or did they have a local doctor? That is an excellent question.
Mm-hmm. I don't know of a doctor in the house, and I don't know of a local doctor's name off the top of my head, but they did have an abundance of medicinal remedies, and I believe Richard Henry Lee's memorandum book lists various remedies for everything from gallstones to all sorts of stuff. So they had their own remedies, and
I feel like Richard Henry Lee probably thought of himself as an untrained doctor.
Right,
he was obsessed with medicine. Absolutely.
And of course, Dr. Shippen, who was Alice Shippen's husband, Alice being one of the daughters of Thomas Lee, he was involved with the family. So I'm sure he gave some great tips.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, and I know as well that a lot of the, so, we think about doctors now in 2021 very differently than they were during the colonial era. It wasn't really until the 19th century that doctors became this sort of prestigious class of people. Back during the 18th century, I mean, it was literally, people that read books from Europe and just kind of practiced on their own.
Grind up some leaves and
absolutely. It was so much,
milk.
There wasn't a lot of real good science happening back then, but a lot of the enslaved folks too would have been acting as, there's tons of evidence throughout the colonies of white families, right? The big families sort of like calling on enslaved doctors and midwives to help them with ailments. So yeah, it was an interesting time. Let's see, another question from TM Fine. Was Punch magazine a local Virginia periodical?
No, it was actually an English magazine of satire and humor, and it came out weekly.
Absolutely. And another one from TM Fine. Interesting portrayal of ladies' dresses in mourning. Wow, a full year and dressed in black. I know, incredible. Yeah, so they're just sort of talking about watching Gone with the Wind recently and watching Scarlett in full black, head to toe during a party. Yeah, you know, that whole period was so formal and in the sense of death, and we've kind of
there was such etiquette around it.
Yeah, so much etiquette, and now it's kind of like, oh, you just cremate somebody and that's it. And there's,
Right.
I don't know, there's
Throw on a black shirt.
Yeah, there's something very beautiful about, I think, the rituals around that, during that period. Absolutely. William Etheridge, great question. Where are the Lees buried? All over the place. So I think Philip is somewhere at Stratford, but we don't know where, correct?
Philip Ludwia Lee?
Yeah, I think so.
They've been removed. They were removed by descendants.
Was removed with them. Okay.
Yeah. Anyone who was in the vaults is no longer there.
Yeah, so there is an empty vault at Stratford Hall, and they were moved to a family cemetery somewhere.
But I still want to get down into that vault.
I know. Absolutely. Let's see here. All right, Charles asks, what was below the acorns in the hair display? Let me look really fast here.
It was probably a bunch of bracelets. I can't remember.
Yeah, it looks like or brooches or
yeah,
something like that.
So everything you can imagine they made out of hair. People would gift bouquets of hair, these beautifully braided flowers to each other. So incredibly personal gifts.
I love it. Barbara says, just want to say what a great presentation. Thank you, Barbara.
Yeah.
Do you have to do anything in particular to store items with hair? Hair lasts.
It surprisingly does, as long as it's in the right HVAC temperature controlled environment. It does wonderful. It really holds up well.
Absolutely. Mike asks a great question, which I'm happy to answer. Are there known graves of enslaved persons at Stratford Hall? Absolutely. We actually have a marked and interpreted cemetery of enslaved people on site. And there's another one that might be off site a little bit that one of our staff members, senior staff members, located not too long ago. But we actually just did our this last summer, we had about 40 plus descendants of the enslaved African Americans and Africans come out to site for our inaugural First Africans Day. And we've done, that day we did this, we've done other sort of events out at Stratford where we have these sort of commemoration ceremonies at the site of these enslaved people's graves. So yes, there is, and it's a really beautiful space to come and to reflect and to sort of pay honor to these individuals. Our audio tours, actually, all 4 of them end at the cemetery as a way to sort of pause and think about their contributions to Stratford and to our history as a country. Anything else?
Any other questions?
I am so excited. I mean, I think, you know, whenever it's one of those things too, right, Amy? We were literally like in a tunnel with this for 2 years, and there were times when we just wanted to just stop.
It was very emotional roller coaster. Like one day I loved it, the next day I hated it.
Right, and everything from just getting the decals to stick. I mean, the stress was real.
Really, everything was done in-house, like everything. Sticking those tiny little labels up. Yeah, everything.
Put on some 80s music and groove and try not to mess things up. But you know, it was one of those things too where it's been now a few months since it's been finished. We've had some private showings. We're going to have an official sort of ribbon cutting in a few weeks. But I think that, you know, even just in tonight's presentation, I'm getting excited about the options that we have, you know, that, and this is literally, I mean, this is the tip of the iceberg. We have so many amazing things in our collections at Stratford.
Hugely diverse.
Yeah, and so many stories to tell. So I think all of these objects are important and really talking about the textures of daily life. We're going to be opening this exhibit formally on October 27th. It'll be a Wednesday towards the end of the month. So please come out and see it. It is part of the new tour experience. Come get your booklet, walk through the exhibit, take your time, take an audio tour, and yeah, just come see the stuff in person. It's pretty incredible.
Please, 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 please.
Fantastic. Awesome. Well, thank you all for zooming in. Thank you, Amy, for your wonderful work.
Thank you.
Awesome. Fantastic. All right, everyone. Well, I will see you all hopefully soon. And yes, let's all get out to Stratford and come visit Amy and our love child of sorts in the exhibit. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.